What's up everyone, and thank you for stopping by. Today's project is this Murray Lawn Mower, and the problem is that I just got it off the curb for free and I don't know anything about it. It does look to be in fantastic condition, so I have to wonder, why would they give this away? Let's take a good look at it, find out what's wrong with it, hopefully we can fix it. In this video, we try and repair this mower. However, it may not be the exact repair you need to make to yours. We'll explore other options later in the video. So this mower was one of two mowers that was being given away, and the interesting part was that both mowers had Tecumseh engines on them, so I'm guessing they must really like them. Now, I don't mind these engines, but it does have a few issues that I don't really care for. The first thing is their air filter covers, which allow the filter to get wet, and the other is that both the muffler and the intake are on the same side of the engine, which makes it kind of cumbersome to work on, as you'll see here in a bit. Now, aside from a missing air filter cover, this mower looks to be in great condition, so I don't think it's been used all that much, maybe a few seasons. If we look at the dipstick, there's plenty of oil in the engine, and it doesn't look dirty at all, which is a huge change from what I normally see. Usually the oil is very low and dirty. Now, there's also not a drop of gas in the tank, so I don't think it's been used in a long time. The other thing that I noticed was that the bell is still connected to the gas cap. The fact that it's still there means that this mower has not been used that much. The bell is part of the cap's venting system, and without it, your engine might stall after a few minutes of running. Now, since I don't know anything about this mower, I would normally use my spark checker to confirm that the ignition system is working. To use it, just install the checker in line with the spark plug, pull the rope, and watch for an orange glow. However, some of the viewers want me to skip this step. Instead, they want me to put gasoline into the carb's throat for a test start. Now, this would test whether or not we have spark and compression all in one test. However, it won't show which one's missing if the engine doesn't start. So luckily it started and ran for a few seconds, which means this engine has a working ignition system and enough compression for it to run. Now, if it didn't run, then we would use the spark checker to see if we're missing spark, and if that was good, we then have to use a compression tester to see if this engine is even healthy enough to run. There is one thing that needs to be looked at, and that's the cable for the brake handle. It's not working smoothly, causing it to get stuck halfway in its travel, and the reason for this is it looks like someone's bent the cable. This sometimes happens when putting it away for storage. The owner will loosen the handlebar and then bend it over the mower, and if they're not careful, the cable will get caught in the lower handle, resulting in a damaged cable. To avoid this in the future, make sure the cable is moved away to the outside of the handle when bending it over. The other thing that I noticed was that the engine ran a bit faster than normal during the test run. The reason for this is that the plate is stuck in the fully open position, which would normally control how fast the engine runs. I hate to say it, but this normally happens when the carb leaks gasoline into the engine and gums up the pivot for the throttle plate, which means we cannot put gasoline into the tank for a test run, otherwise the engine will over-rev and we could damage it. This is when we get to see why having the muffler and the intake on the same side of the engine is a bit of a pain. The main reason is space. There's not a lot of room to remove the carburetor from the intake pipe, so I like to take the carb off while it's still attached to it. But to take the intake pipe off, I need to remove the muffler. I know it's an extra step, but it just seems a little excessive to me. After removing the bowl nut, we can see it's gummed up with old varnished gasoline, which is not a good sign. That means that it was put away with gasoline in the tank, which is not a good idea. We might now have a carburetor that's gummed up and needs a good cleaning, or worse yet, replaced. Once the bowl is off the carburetor, we can see that the bottom is covered with old sticky gasoline. It's not that far gone, but I don't know if we can save this carburetor. I cannot confirm that this is ethanol gasoline, but I'm going to guess that it is. One of the worst things to put in small engines is ethanol gasoline. Yes, it will run on it, but it simply does not store very well. If you use your mower all year round, I don't see a problem using ethanol gasoline, but if you have a winter season, I'd be very careful using it and run it dry before putting it away. Now, after removing the bowl gasket, float, and needle, I'm going to start using carb cleaner to remove the old gasoline. If you don't have carb cleaner, try brake cleaner instead. I'll start spraying everything down that had contact with the old gasoline and any passages that I find in the carburetor. I'm not going to show you the full detailed cleaning though, and the reason for this is it's not going to fix the main problem with this carburetor. I spent over 40 minutes cleaning every single part that had old gasoline on it and removed both jets, soaked and cleared them using different size wires and micro drill bits, but the main problem that put this mower away in storage has not yet been addressed, which I'll get to here in a bit. I don't want to waste your time showing you a full cleaning only for it to not work in the end. You'll see what I'm talking about here in a bit. After cleaning everything that I could, now I'm going to separate the carburetor from the intake pipe so we can get access to the stuck throttle plate. And as you can see, it is definitely stuck in place. Now the easiest way to fix this is to spray carb cleaner at the bottom of the pivot and let it soak. Do this repeatedly and the old gasoline should start to come loose. Then I'll try to work the plate free. Just be very careful doing this, otherwise you might break something. Once it's broken loose, the carb cleaner will be able to clean the pivot a whole lot better. Now once the plate is free, we can then install the carb back on the intake pipe and then start putting the carburetor back together. Now if I had a small engine shop and I opened the carb to find it all gummed up with old gasoline, I would have automatically replaced the carb. The reason is time. I would normally stock a few of these carbs in the warehouse so there would be no waiting for one to come in the mail. The chances of cleaning the old carb and getting it to work is good, considering that it wasn't that bad, but replacing it with a new carb increases my chances of a successful repair, so it's the best option. Now if I'd opened the carb and it was pretty much clean and the only problem was a clogged jet, the success rate would be very high to begin with, so I wouldn't bother replacing it then. After installing the float, you can see it's not parallel with the mounting surface for the bowl. The needle sits against the seat, and since the seat has been damaged, it forces the float not to be parallel anymore. What this means is that the needle will not be able to stop the flow of gasoline through the carburetor. This is probably the reason why it was put away. It was slowly leaking gas. This is when we have to make a decision. Should we try and use the carb anyway, replace the seat, or just order a new carb? Since we've made it this far, we might as well install the carb to see if it's still leaking. Another reason why this carb might be leaking gasoline is that the float and needle would be stuck in the open position. If you get a mower that's new to you and you decide to put gasoline in the tank to try and start it, make sure the air filter and its cover are not initially on the engine. That way it'll be easier to see if the carb is leaking gasoline. If you have a primer bulb, you may have to press it a few times before it starts leaking. One other reason why this carb would be leaking is if the float had a hole in it. It would then not work the needle to stop the fuel flow through the carb. The easiest fix for both would be to replace the carb. Now, if you wanted to clean the carb to get it working again, just be prepared to work on it more than once before it works correctly. The last thing to do is dump the old oil out of the engine and replace it with new, fresh oil. Make sure you don't overfill the oil, and it's a good practice to check the oil level several times to make sure you get a good reading. After that, we can then put a small amount of gasoline into the tank and see if the carb is leaking. Now, after adding gasoline to the tank, it wasn't leaking. However, after pressing the bulb a few times, it started to leak out of the throat of the carb and would not stop. That means we need to either replace the seat or the carb, and to make sure that this fix has a higher chance of succeeding, I'm just going to replace the carb instead. Now, this is the reason why I didn't bother showing you the entire cleaning process, because it wasn't the reason why this carb needed to be replaced. After removing the air filter adapter from the old carb, we can then compare it to the new carb that we ordered online. Now this carb was only $11 after taxes, so it's a very affordable option. Just look them both over and make sure they pretty much look the same. Now the new one is almost identical to the old one, so I'll install it onto the engine and then we'll try starting again. Now since I've already shown the carb's installation, I'll skip over it the second time. And of course, after installing the new carb, it's not leaking. That means we can now replace the air filter and the filter cover. Now, both of these were missing from this mower, so unfortunately, we had to replace them. The filter came in a multi-pack, and for just the one, it was only $2, while the cover was a little bit more expensive at $12. That means the total for this repair was only $25. The time for the repair took almost 3 hours, but it would have been half that time if we just replaced the carb instead of trying to clean it. So the engine started on the first pull, which is great. However, it was running way too fast, so we need to adjust the engine speed a bit. Luckily, it's very easy to do. All we need to do is bend this tab that holds the governor spring back towards the carb while it's running. So I was able to get the engine speed down to where it's supposed to be. However, after filming, I took a closer look at the governor's spring, and I noticed that it had repositioned itself not at the back of this loop, but at the far end of it, and that's why the engine speed was so high. I then repositioned the spring to where it was supposed to be, and then bent that tab back to its normal shape. I have to say, this engine sounds very healthy. There's no strange noises, and it's a very smooth running engine as well. As long as the oil is clean and filled to the full level, I expect this engine to last a very long time. So my question is, if the carb you were working on looked as bad as the one I had, would you still try and clean it, or would you just order a new carb instead? Personally, I try and clean them, but I certainly wish I could get back all those wasted hours on failed cleaning attempts. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions, and I hope to see you in the next video.